What's up, everybody? I'm Jamal.
And I'm Brandon, and this is The Way We Ball.
To live and die in LA, that's the title for today's pod, episode 9 of the Way We Ball podcast. It's been flying because we've been winning, and winning is fun. Brandon, this is it. Conference finals. We win this, we go on to the MLS Cup finals. We mentioned last week that SKC was going to be that team to really test us, and if we beat them, we could beat anybody. Are you still feeling that way, Brandon?
Absolutely, man. I mean, especially the way we played. This was a hard-fought game. I mean, the best part was when you look at the statistics, when we finished the half, we had 74% possession, and we absolutely dominated it. We made Quiones look special out on the wing. I felt like this team is so playoff built. I think we slayed the dragon. Bring on LA.
You mentioned Quinones. I think SKC did a terrible job of doing whatever Real Salt Lake did, because we saw the Quinones that we were used to seeing before that Real Salt Lake matchup. They did a good job of containing him, containing his speed, and he just ran loose. I put in my notes while watching that match that Quinones is honestly a left foot away from being elite, and that might be stretching it, but man, the guy's great. It's just if he could get that left foot going, he'd be an elite player. So we'll start off today's episode with breaking down the match, and then we're going to take a look at our our Western Conference opponents, LAFC. From there, we'll take a look at the Eastern Conference, everything happening there, and we have a new segment to introduce, and that's our Around the Globe, Ballin' Around the Globe segment. And then we'll go back to our Ball in, Ball out segment. So again, thank you all for joining us for episode 9 of the Way We Ball podcast. So Brandon, you want to start things off with that match against SKC?
So I alluded to at the beginning, possession. We saw our midfield do midfield things. Ache was great. I mean, Coco did extremely well, as to be mentioned. I know we've been hard on him, but he looked solid at points. Quiones, like you mentioned, it's funny. I had in my notes as well, like Quiones is special. He had some shots on goal that were elite, and it's like if this guy could really develop another foot, like you mentioned, he is going to be scary good, like quite top elite MLS kind of good. Like I think that's not a stretch saying it. I understand his potential. If you look, especially in big games, the U.S. Open Cup final, he was a huge threat throughout that entire match. Every time we've had a big game, he showed up, and he did again last night. I think the sky is the limit for that guy.
Yeah, no, I agree. He was definitely one of the spotlights for us. That midfield together, Coco played much better than the series before. Ache just being Ache, Artur, the anchor back there that we need in these type of games, and they just let Quinones run free, and it was a difference maker. I was a little disappointed with Bossy. Bossy had a lot of turnovers in the first half. I think within the first 30 minutes, he had like 4 or 5. But it seemed like he cleaned it up. So everything that I was upset about, totally forgot about it within the second half. But yeah, we mentioned last week, this is a point I wanted to get out while I was watching this game. We mentioned last week that this long break could either hurt or help us, and that one of these teams was going to benefit more than the other. I think it was pretty clear who benefited from that long break.
We looked good. We had that speed that I felt like we didn't have against Salt Lake, and maybe that was their game plan, but Quiones, I guess when you open him up, he looks incredibly different. On top of that, our goal. I mean, we haven't even mentioned that. What a beautiful cross from the corner from there on the corner from Herrera, and it was like perfect height meets perfect jump on Escobar. It was a beautiful header. That's our second time we've scored off a set piece since Portland. So I mean, heck yeah, man! If we can keep adding that to our arsenal and keep on winning, this is a really good thing. And I loved it. It was the kind of game that we needed, and holy Steve Clark, man, that guy should wear a cape. He was incredible that game.
Ever since you mentioned our set pieces and our corner kicks, they've been thriving off them.
It's been amazing, man.
It's funny you mentioned that. Speaking of headers, in the 7th minute on the TV broadcast, the ball goes out of bounds. There's a random fan who runs towards the ball. He's sitting in those like field side seats. I don't know if you caught that, and he just heads it. It doesn't go anywhere. He just heads it. And I remember thinking, like, dude, sign that guy up. That's exactly what we need. Um,
Dude,
but
I will say in the 64th minute though, man, like Baird had a couple of moments though. He was the only, if we have to be frustrated with something and in terms of a player, he missed an opportunity where it was a rally he should have had, and then when he tried to dribble around the keeper, that wasn't really a good take. I was kind of hoping he would just put it on, because even if it was a deflection, I think there was enough guys behind him for somebody to put in an open netter. So he was frustrating. That's the best way I could put it.
yeah,
Watching him today, that's me nitpicking a 1-0 win.
no, I mean it's everything was going so smooth. That game felt like it should have been a 3-0 game, a 4-0
Yes.
game. We just don't have that finisher, and that's tale as old as time. It seems with this current Dynamo squad, we just don't have that guy that can put in the back of the net that we have all the confidence in. And Barrett again showed he's not that guy. Unfortunately, he does a great job of playing what Ben wants in that position. But in these moments, in these games, you need that guy that can score. You need that Boyanga like LAFC has, and we don't have that with Baird, unfortunately. That's a problem to worry about in the offseason because, again, we're here for a reason. We belong here. We're playing such a fun style, and I think you had mentioned it, and I'll just reiterate it. This team, that midfield, we're a really good team, and it's 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 up there with those early Dynamo teams, those 2006, 2007, 2008 Dynamo teams, um, that we were used to seeing, those championship winning teams. And we might not be better than those teams, but I will say the current squad we have is better for the city of Houston. What I mean by that is that we have a lot of South Americans, Central Americans. We have a huge Latin population. We have a big Nigerian population. Glenn Davis always talks about it. This style of soccer is what the population of Houston likes to see in their soccer. The Dynamo, the old regime, the championship winning regime, yeah, they were great, but it was kind of boring. It wasn't the flair, it wasn't the ball controlling football or soccer that the Latin community loves. And I think again, this team might not be better, but this team is better for the city of Houston. Am I crazy for thinking that?
No, you're right. They play with that kind of spice in their game. There's that little bit of just sauciness to it with that, whether it's just, it's fun to watch, man. Even if you're not a really huge soccer fan, you turn on a Dynamo game and you're watching what they do dancing around in the midfield and you're just kind of drawn to it. It's why I've understood why people who aren't diehard soccer fans, when they watch World Cup and they see Brazil, they're like, this is really fun. And you're like, yeah, they play with that just kind of flair. And I get it. It's so attractive. But even Glenn Davis even mentioned this midfield is the best possession midfield team ever in team history. And I mean, how can you argue with it? I think the proof is in the pudding, especially with how deep the MLS is now compared to our early 2000 teams. It it's without saying that you could argue that this team is like our best team in terms of talent. They may not be our most dominant because back in the day the talent pool wasn't as deep as it is today, but being our best possession midfield, most definitely.
And that defense complements it as well. That back line complements it very well. It's unfortunate because it's Sebas, the Paraguayan Sebas, was the guy that we thought he was going to be. This team would have been very, very scary. So, but again, that's a problem to worry about later. But let's talk about this team. Let's talk about the breakup. The defensive line really impressed me. I saw Acha get after Mikael a little bit. In the game, but it looked like he cleaned up his mistakes. They mentioned in the broadcast that it looked like Herrera was a little frustrated with Mikael taking too long on the ball. He wanted quick movement. He wanted the ball back in the midfield. He wanted to move the ball fast. Mikael looked like he cleaned that up. Sviatchenko just being Sviatchenko, being the leader back there, just being that anchor back there that we needed. And man, I'd love to see how much Dorsey runs in a match. That guy, I was pointing out to my girlfriend, like, just watch Dorsey, and she was cracking up because she's not the biggest soccer fan, but she was laughing at, she would just see Dorsey run across the screen, like with no context. You just see a guy running across the screen, and that's what Dorsey does. He goes back on defense. He's a great attacking option. Um, Up to this point, he's my MVP for the season. not I don't think he's the best player on the field, but had he not found this new success, I don't think we're where we're at today. We are where we're at today, without Dorsey finding that little extra motivation that he's found in this later half of the season.
So you're definitely right. He has given us such a heartbeat that I don't think we all realized how badly we needed it. Now, the one thing I will have to damper our parade with is with Svechenko. There was a huge controversial moment with the possible, was it a handball inside the box a couple minutes right after we scored the Escobar goal. And looking at video replay, I get it. I get why people are really upset, especially if it happened to us, I would be up in arms. I mean, heck, I'm reading verbatim the quote in the press from head coach from Sporting KC, Peter Vermees, where he said, "Yeah, I saw it and it was a handball. It should have been a red card." I mean, looking
It's a
at
bit
it,
rough.
I said the red card was a bit tough too, but to say it's not a handball, oh man, I would be lying. The fan in me is like, hell no, that wasn't a handball. Let's play on, baby. But that was a gift. Svetchenko could have cost us in a big moment there. I mean, granted, that's such a reactionary play. I mean, any one of us is going to get hit by that. But it was, we escaped in that kind of moment. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the fact that like none of the guys are denying it either. I think Sviatchenko mentioned you need luck in the postseason, and sometimes you need things to roll your way. You know what though? Sports gods owed it to us after that Texans game. Speaking of bad officiating, I just the sports gods owed us one because it was a terrible day. But our producer Shane mentioned that Glenn said the way that the ruling is written that it was the correct call. Um, Again, it's a Dynamo podcast, so we'll lean towards favor of the Dynamo and that being the correct call. But I'm with you. If I was an SKC fan, I'd be livid.
I I assume Glenn is probably saying because like he didn't have time to move and it was such a blast that like it just hit his arm like the same way it would hit your hip if you were whatever, right? Like you just didn't have time to change his direction. So that's why it wouldn't have been card. Yeah, and that like his arm is being closer to his body rather than it sticking it out. But I I can understand like yes, the fan in me is going to stick to that where it was like, yeah, but if you look, he wasn't sticking his arm out as much as it was just being blasted. But honestly, if it's the other way around, we would all be, this is how we would lead the podcast. You know, we wouldn't just be now bringing it up. But either way, it's not like SKC didn't have moments later on in the game to kind of capitalize from that. Like they could have moved on. They did have a lot of opportunities. It's just that Steve Clark was making some insane saves, dude. Like that was out of this world highlight package that he put on. He is a big reason why we are moving on. Like that cannot be buried.
Yeah, no, he played a huge role in us advancing. That defense too did a great job. We mentioned Bolido being very dangerous, and they did a good job of making him not really seem very relevant, to be honest with you. And then later on towards the game, he plays a little bit higher, I guess trying to create more chances, but it didn't really do much for them. They had a few scary chances, but at the end of the day, it was a pretty, I would call it convincing. It was a pretty convincing win. We controlled possession, we controlled the midfield. And again, if we had a clinical finisher, this is a 2-3, maybe even 4-0 match. Who was your
I,
player of the game?
I want to give it to Escobar because like his goal, but it's going to be Quiones for me just because of what I saw in that first half. He was putting shots on target that was like I just saw a whole new team with this guy. For the first time, it was like one of those things where it was like, oh wow, this is a cup run that we can continue to produce if this guy can produce. Like that's how excited I got in that first half watching him. So he's going to be my player of the game for that fact. But if people gave it to Ache, I'd understand as well. He drew up so much. But for me, Quiones, because that was exciting. I thought he set the tempo.
Yeah, I agree, and it really shows how important he is. When Real Salt Lake shut him down, our offense was not moving like this. When you free up Quinones, he's such a dangerous weapon that it gives our midfield so much area to move, so much area to just do their thing, be maestros with the soccer ball. So, um, Quinones was up there for me. He was player of the match because aside from that, that was our spark of offense in the first 5-10 minutes. He had those two right foot shots. One of them was like a few feet outside of the 18, almost went in, and he showed that goalkeeper that he's a threat. And so,
Yeah.
again, it just felt like you turned the kid on, and it changed the game for us offensively. It really opened things up for us, and it was night and day from that Real Salt Lake match that we saw. Um,
So hold on, one question I want to ask you. I mean, especially as the match progressed, do you think Ben has just zero confidence in the bench?
it's I was frustrated that he went with Aleu over Thor. I mean, I know why we don't really need that scoring piece, but I thought what worried me is let's say SKC did pull a goal out and we go back into penalties. Is that really who you want taking a penalty shot? And then he put Caicedo in a little bit later. I think a big part of this offseason is going to be fixing that bench up, making it a little bit deeper. Um, because outside of those two guys, who else is he really using in the postseason? He's not touching Ivan Franco. He used Thor once in a moment that we needed a goal, and then outside of
Brad
that,
Brad Smith played last night as well.
Brad Smith. Yeah, Brad Smith played last night, which was a big surprise to me. But I guess he wanted Quinones to rest up in the case that we were to advance. But yeah, I
Well,
don't know if.
that was
Go
the
ahead.
thing too. So he took off Keone's for Smith, and I thought, like, is he doing that in case we go to penalties? Because if you remember, Keone's got saved
Yeah.
last time, so that was where I was like, is he making the move for that? And then the same thing, he brought in Caicedo for Bossy, who Bossy's been shaking, taking penalties as well. It was a moment where I was like, is this Ben just trying to, like you said, buy more time? But we just came back from international break, or is he thinking if this goes to penalties, I need to set it up where these are the best takers? I that was the one biggest moment where I was watching these subs and I got worried to where I was like, does he have no confidence in this bench or all the confidence? I was very confused in that moment.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I think if that was his theory, then I think he would go with Thor over Aleu if he was worried about the PKs.
Good
I
point.
think he just wanted to go heavy on defense, and I think I'm pretty sure that's where the game plan was going. But the subs were a little bit later than I was anticipating. But I'm with Ben. I don't really have confidence in our bench either. I don't love our bench, to be honest with you. I would love to see Thor get more playing time. After seeing Baird whiff on those, I don't want to call them gimmies, but whiff on those shots, part of me felt like Thor puts us back in the net.
Yeah, you and I have always been clamoring for more Thor. I don't think anything's going to change for that. Baird was frustrating. We kind of highlighted that as well. I'd understand if we did some more shuffling, but I think Caicedo is somebody that we can trust off the bench. I just haven't seen Ben trust Caicedo that much off the bench, which is odd. I mean, obviously he knows the team better than we do, but to me, every time he's been in, it's never been a pinpoint thing of like, well, he cost us a moment. I just don't understand why he hasn't really seen the pitch that much or coming on so late into a game. So it was nice to see him come on, but come up, this next match, we're gonna need a super sub going forward.
Yeah, and I really like Caicedo. I like what he brings to the club. I'm with you. I think the way that game was played, he could have came on a little bit earlier. And when the guy's on, that guy's throwing his body left and right.
Yeah.
You can't knock him for his effort. Um, so we'll see. We'll see what next round brings. We're gonna need that style of play. We're gonna need a Caicedo type when you have a Boyanga out there and Carlos Vela. So um, yeah, we're definitely gonna need some more Caicedo. We'll see what Ben is thinking for that match. Before we move on, what did you think about the home crowd? How great was it seeing a packed shell?
Dude, the singing was so tremendous. Like that was a legit all together one voice. Like you could just hear the dynamo crystal clear. And what's funny is even when I rewatched it back on like television, like it just put me right back into the moment of just hearing the voices. Like that was so sick. That was a good crowd. Obviously, what's funny is some people were like, well, it was cold. And it's like, it's either too hot, it's too cold. Like, sorry, we can't have it perfect. I'm glad people showed up. I hope we set the tone for next year. I think the team's done a good job of doing that.
Yeah, I'm sure we had a lot of first timers. I've seen on Twitter already a lot of social media folks and influencers went for the first time. And as we mentioned earlier, it's a fun style of soccer to watch. It's
Yep.
very favorable to the viewer. And I'm more than sure a lot of those people are going to come back. But again, we'll give you roses when you deserve it. And that front office deserve their roses after this week. They did a great job of hyping it up. They did a great job of doing activations, in store signings. They had that event at Trillburgers. They just did a great job of letting people know, hey, we're the Dynamo, we're here, we have a playoff match. It wasn't this whole fill the dreams, build it, and they'll come, get to the playoffs and they'll come. I think they've learned the hard way. It takes more than that. It takes more than just getting there. You have to, you have to get your feet on the ground and do some work yourself. So hats off to them. The front office did a great job. And it coincided. I thought it was very strange that they reposted the story of a marketing person they hired back in March. And I remember reading that when it first came out, and I didn't think much of it. It's been so many months since that's happened. So when I retweeted the story, someone called this out and was like, "Hey, this happened back in March." But I will say, I feel like this week has been totally different from what we've seen since March, since the beginning of the season. And again, the proof is in the pudding. You saw it with a packed shell stadium, and I don't think that happens without all the effort that the front office put in this last week or so.
100%, man. Like everything that they did in terms of the marketing side with the players, it everything was a yes. Like there was not one thing that I mean, obviously you can do something a little bit better here or there if you're nitpicking, but in terms of everything they offered leading up to it, it was like this is a great idea. And it just came off smart. And I don't know if the transition maybe just now is, even though it happened in February, maybe the training wheels have officially been taken off and this is what they're showing. Whatever the change is, I don't care. I'm here for it. I hope this week continues and they take this momentum and continue to build off of it, because this is a team that I feel is going to be, if they win an MLS championship, it's one of those where like I almost feel bad because they're MLS champions that are like fought hard all year long, and they're not going to be as appreciated as they probably should be. And that's so sad to kind of say, but yet obviously I want us to win it all, but hopefully we catch on in a moment and it's lightning in a bottle. But I fear
Yeah.
that this team isn't going to be as appreciated as they should.
Yeah, I get lost in my thoughts, and I was thinking about that exactly. Like, if this team were to win it, does that home opener next year, is the average soccer fan thinking like, "Oh, well, there's no more they reached the highest pinnacle, do I have to go back? Do I really have to support them?" Or does the average soccer fan think like, "Oh man, I really got to see this team. These guys are champions and I got to go support." And but I agree with you, like this is a really good team, and they've had that state. We're last place in the league as far as attendance, and not that we don't deserve it, but it's a big bummer, man, that we've had this in the city of Houston, and a lot of people didn't even know about it.
Well, I mean, like I feel bad because like Steve Clark even was like quoted as saying in his press conference where he was like, I've been a goalie for 15 years and this is like one or two the most fun I've ever had. And that says a lot about his teammates and who he's playing with, because I'm sure the one was probably when he won it all in Portland, and
Yeah.
they have an incredible atmosphere every single game. So like that's probably easy to get swept up in. But there's a reason why this team is so special to him. And I was just thinking to like you and me and producer Shay, like, and all the like fans, like, yeah, we're gonna love that. The ones that like haven't missed anything. But in terms of the city, that's where it makes me sad, because what's the parade gonna be like? Is this gonna be like, oh, an eye opener, like for everybody? Like, who did we sign? And it's like, no, that's not what happened. That makes me sad to think about, but at the same time, I think it has to happen for us to be able to start to buy back in, because if they want to talk smack against Messi, at least they can say we're the champs in not only US Open Cup but in MLS Cup. So we got to win. It's crazy to think that I'll be so happy and sad if we win it all.
Yeah, I mean, I hate talking like this because it's assuming the worst, but winning SKC for me was kind of like our championship game, because no matter what happens from here, we can only build off of it. Let's say we
Yeah.
lose against LAFC. Okay, we lost against the Western Conference Finals, but we played a fun style of soccer. We have a foundation now that we're just going to build off of. And we've showed what the city's capable of at that SKC match as far as having a packed crowd, a packed shell stadium. So for me, that match, that last home game, and to finish the way it did, I'm very
Yeah.
invested in what happens next Saturday against LAFC. But this to me was the bigger picture. And I
I
think,
like your optimism more.
I mean, I just felt like last Saturday was very important to show people that this team is fun to watch. Soccer games can be fun to watch. Just get out there and support, and you have a team, and you have a really good team, and things are going great right now. So I just felt like this weekend was very, very important to the growth of this club in the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be something that it was just so fun, man. It was so fun. That crowd was rocking. That's how it needs to be. And you're right. Hopefully it continues. Big ups to the crowd, man. It was y'all sounded so good in the singing, everything. Like just if you replay it on your television, you can just hear the songs coming through crisply, and that's the best part. That's a good sign of everything.
There's some like videos on Twitter and TikToks and just different angles from, you get different perspective of different parts of the stadium, and no matter where you're at, it just looked packed, it looked fun. I mean, I'm always going to
Yeah.
complain about that club, is it the East or
Yeah.
West that faces the
East End
camera,
Club.
the East End club. I'm always going to complain about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can come up with some fun stuff in the off season on what to do there. I feel like the club could do a better job as far as motivating people to go outside, maybe offer free food and drinks outside and just have like a waitress or something. But aside from that, everything was incredible, and the atmosphere just looked fun, and it looked like those old Robertson days that we always get nostalgic about. And so it was fun to finally see it. And I don't know if Ted was in town or not, but I hope that he was able to see the reason he purchased this club.
I feel like Ted's riding in on every game from here on out now. I don't
Yeah.
know if he was there, but I would assume he had to be. I mean, no way he's
Yeah.
going to miss that.
Yeah, hopefully I'd like for him to bask in his glory, so to speak. So let's move on. Brandon, LAFC, what are your thoughts? What are your predictions? Let's hear what you got to say
Uh,
about that.
so you can go off recent history. This year we've played them in June 10th and June 14th. And in those two games, we won 5-0. We won 4-0 at our house, and then we won 1-0 at their house, um, which is kind of funny because if you look at our overall record, our only win was that last win that we had. So, in terms of at LAFC, but we're red hot, man. We're 10-1-6 in all competitions since Leagues Cup. Like, we've only had one loss. So, this team's absolutely rolling. So, the fact that we're going into a place that we've won, I feel absolutely sky high for this. Now, looking at some of the numbers, uh, in terms of betting odds, now, who do you obviously think is favored here, LAFC or us?
LA.
Yeah, so they actually have LAFC as their number one overall favorite to win it all, at plus 138, Cincy at plus 141, Columbus Crew at plus 380, and then Houston plus 750. Like, we're still, even if you want to ride in the final four for good money, like, that's amazing. So against us head to head, in terms of LAFC, if you went money line, is minus 160. We're plus 375. And then even if you want to go draws into extra time penalties, like you can go draw at plus 325. Now that's huge to me if I'm laying money on that because we've tied them overall a lot. Like we've especially at their place too. Like we're 1, 2, and 4. So we've lost, but like that was early Dynamo, like when we were really bad going up against top club. Now that it's a different story, obviously winning twice against them. So it's going to go back and forth. The other thing that I need to mention too, I looked at the over under because this has been crazy in terms of over unders. So the over 2.5 goals is minus 130, which is amazing when you think about it because in the every time we've faced LAFC, only 3 times have we not gone over 3 goals. So like that tells like it's been a ton of goals in that case. But at the same time, there were 0 games last round that went over 3 goals. 10 in the first round, 0 in the second round. Now you're moving on later in the playoffs. Usually you think defenses just creep up, but the numbers are telling us that LAFC is not only heavily favored, but over three goals is something that you could see here. So this tells me that it's going to be heavily played in the midfield, and it's going to be something that can be producing goals. So if you want to bet, we're looking good, man. Not only on this game, but in a future. My God, you could really be rolling in it.
Yeah, no, I told you before the postseason started, I had us winning it all, and I have a lot of money potentially sitting on this. So, um, who needs a sponsor, right? When you basically hit the lotto after this playoff series. But back to what we had mentioned last week. I personally, I'm glad that it's LA. I did not want to face Seattle just because
Same.
of history. Us, we don't have the best. We don't have any luck out there. Not only that, though, another part of it is the playing surface. Seattle, looking at it again this week, Seattle has that turf. Looks like plastic. Looks like they're playing on just plastic. It's like shiny, and you have to just think of longevity of our guys. Worst case scenario, we beat Seattle, but Quinones gets hurt. Herrera gets hurt. So, not saying that we're completely safe playing in LA, but the chances of getting hurt are far less playing on natural grass than it is playing on turf. So I'm glad we avoid Seattle just because of the turf, the history, and I mean Seattle's a strong opponent. So I'm glad that we got LA. I think it's going to be a fun match, despite whatever the outcome is. I think it's going to be a fun offensive battle, and I'm really looking forward to Saturday.
So I mean, I'm with you on turf. I absolutely hate it. And what's amazing with that is even if, so once we play at LAFC, which is nice grass, winner even against between Columbus and Cincinnati will also be grass because whoever wins this plays at their stadium, either Columbus or Cincinnati. So it's clear cut from here. So that's a good sign, especially for our guys going forward. Because I'm with you. I think a lot of just small injuries or stupid bounces of the ball happen more on turf. So to be away from that, I feel a lot better. Plus, we know LAFC's game. I mean, in this sense, and we haven't conceded a goal to them technically in the 2023 year. And on top of that, you look at their overall players. Dennis Bouanga, 20 goals, 7 assists. Obviously, he's the Golden Boot winner, most goals in MLS. Behind him, Vela, 9 goals, 12 assists. And then after that, it falls off big time. They're tied third goal scorers, both with 4 goals and both with 1 assist, Hillington and Tillman. And then that's about it. Like they obviously get their goals from 2 guys. And right now, Bawanga is playing out of his mind, and you can almost lay a bet every single time for him to score because he has been that automatic. He's scored in every one of their rounds here so far in the playoffs, and we're going to have to do a lot to stop him. Now, clearly we have. We did it earlier this year in June. We're going to have to do the same thing. I feel good about cutting off their midfield with our midfielders. I think we have the best in the game. And then on top of that, Svetchenko. Thank God he didn't get that red card that Vermees wanted so badly because now we still get him for the Western Conference Finals. And he is going to be key to make sure that we are lined up correctly to stop Moanga attacking on that outside.
How, I guess going off subject here, how crazy is it? Because you mentioned had Sviatchenko gotten that red, how crazy is it how that teenage has just, I don't want to say fallen off, but not even a factor in this defense. And coming into the season, we mentioned how strong our defense was specifically because of him.
Well, to make it even more full circle for that, the 1 goal that we scored at LAFC was by Mikael. So that just shows how much he's actually been important for as to go up against them and how amazing he's been in these playoffs. But you're right, teenage has fallen off, but maybe this is the game that we need him because he can get a late header goal or whatever it might be. He's got great height inside that box, not only like physically, but in terms of his jumping ability. That might be something we need down the stretch to clear things out. So maybe he does get called on late to just do something heroic in the smallest of ways. But you're right. It's incredible how he has kind of just been an afterthought at this point.
Speaking, we had mentioned Ben not having confidence in his subs. A part of me wanted to see Daniel Steres or Teenage go in for one of the either Escobar or Dorsey at the last like 10 minutes just to provide that extra defense because those guys were pushing us hard. Maybe we see something like that in the next round if we get an early goal on those guys. But yeah, I just when you mentioned Sviatchenko, I was like, I wouldn't feel comfortable having Teenage back there if he were to have that red card. But anyway, we'll continue to move on. So give us your predictions for LAFC Dynamo.
Well, we also threw it out on Twitter, and what's funny is everybody picks Dynamo to move on. And of course, why would we stop? As I mentioned, we're 10-1-6 since in all competitions since Leagues Cup. We are literally the hottest team right now in MLS, and I think we continue to ride that wave. This team is special in so many different kind of styles that I think we go into LAFC and we win again. And that makes such an amazing statement from here on out. I don't think that we are going to cool off anytime soon.
Do you have a score prediction?
So history tells me that I should bet the over 2.5 and say like it should be 2-1 Dynamo. And a lot of people are predicting in terms of like one, they keep saying one goal isn't going to be enough in this. I disagree. I think this playoffs and especially how it's been going these late rounds, I think one goal is enough. Every game last in the second round ended 1-0. I think that's all it takes. At least 1-1 and we win it in penalties. I think we are that kind of team right now that is built for penalties. This is the first kind of, if it goes to that next round, I actually think is in our favor because in terms of LAFC, we face more penalty actions. So even if it goes 1-1 and we head to extra time and then penalties, I think that's in our favor, to be honest with you. So I'm going to go with the score of I think we just win 1-0 and we move on.
I'm going with a 2-1 victory. Us.
Oh,
I think we score early. I think LAFC equalizes right before halftime. And Ben puts in Thorn Rose to get that extra goal, and he scores around the 70th minute, and we take it home with a 2-1 lead.
this is where I'd say something stupid and be like, if that happens, I'll get a Thor tattoo, but I'm not going to do that because then I'd have to be held to something that ridiculous. So I hope to God that happens, of course. And also, one quick note: thank God yellow cards reset because for the Western Conference Finals, because Coco did pick up a yellow last game, so we don't have to worry about him being suspended on accumulation. Everybody resets for Western Conference.
Well, speaking of betting and all that fun stuff, what does it look like on the eastern side of things?
So Cincinnati and the Crew, man, that is the in-state rivalry that is really built. Now, the numbers in terms of all time between those two are pretty skewed because Cincinnati hasn't been around that long. And on top of that, when they first came out, they were just bottom sellers. This has been the real kind of surge of dominance. But looking at Cincinnati here, they are favored on the money line at plus 115, plus 245 for the Crew, plus 230 for a draw, and the over under minus 125 for the over 2.5, which is amazing because again, only 2 times ever in their history between them have they not gone over 2.5. So they're really predicting this round a lot of goals in terms of being scored. Now the under 2.5 is plus 105. But like I mentioned, every round last game didn't go over 2.5. In the first round, only 10 games did. Now, that's still a lot of games, but you have to remember that was a best of 3 in the first round. So only 10 games to do it. The playoffs is a different beast. So I think the unders are the safer play, and you'll make better money in that. Overall, though, Cincinnati, they've kind of been lacking to the Crew. That's because the Crew had a huge surge of dominance. They won the cup a couple of years ago. This team's also really good, but at Cincinnati, they've got 2 wins, 3 draws, 2 losses, 10 goals scored, 14 against, and they haven't lost to the Crew at home since 2020. So Cincinnati has kind of been doing well, especially lately at home. Their crowd always brings it. They had a very ruckus, but the money tells you Cincinnati's going to move on in this one. But I don't know, man. The Crew've got something going right now. Christian Ramirez coming off the bench. I mean, you want to talk about full circle for Dynamo fans. Him scoring that goal, it was beautiful. Now they'll go into Cincinnati, but they're going to have a good showing as well since they're just about like a 3-hour drive from each other. So this is going to be one that will be. I think both of these games coming up here, is going to be just epic. You know, like when you get to an NCAA Final Four, March Madness, and the Final Four is better than the championship, we could be in that kind of sphere here. I think we're on a collision course of just two amazing games.
Unless we make the championship,
Oh, then
then
it's
of course
obviously that's
yeah.
the best one.
Uh, no, I agree with you. It's going to be a fun weekend, that's for sure. And your predictions? Do you have a prediction for that match? We don't have to go goal, but do you think someone's going to win? I'm assuming you're thinking Columbus.
Well, that's what's funny when we put this on our Twitter as well. Only one person picked Cincinnati to move on. Everybody else picked the Crew. And I think, God, betting on it, I am. I'm going to roll with the Crew on this one just because they have better goal scorers in this. They were the number one goal scoring team in the MLS. I think they still come under. I think in terms of 2.5, I think they win like 2-0, just like they did last game, and then they move on. So for me, I think it's going to be Crew moving on, play us in the final at a 2-0 and hitting and in the under as well.
I forgot who mentioned it, so apologize for not giving you your proper shout out. But someone had mentioned Christian Ramirez in a tweet about playing the Dynamo in the final, and he liked it. So we're in his we're on his radar. So um, were you a big Ramirez fan? I personally I would love to have him with this current squad.
I think his time abroad has made him a better player, and I think he's more
Scotland,
built for
right?
this. Yeah, exactly, Aberdeen. And I think now him coming back and playing not only with this Columbus team, but then coming here, I think he's built more for this squad. And I mean, hell, the last Columbus player we got in our tour worked out in our favor, so why not full circle it?
Yeah. Well, fun fact about the Scottish League, I'm actually a minority investor in a third division Caledonian Braves club. Which leads us to our next segment. Brandon, we're going to introduce a new segment called Ballin' Around the Globe, where we talk about soccer stories or football stories, excuse me, depending on where you're listening from around the world. I'll pick a story, Brandon will pick a story, and we will both share those. So, Giles, why don't you introduce our newest segment?
Ballin' around the globe.
Nice and easy. There you go. Brandon, you want to kick things off with our balling around the globe?
Mine is sweet and short. It's been the viral sensation of where we will travel to the globe of England, where Alejandro Garnacho with the bicycle kick from God, my Lord. And I'm giving props to a Man United player on this, which is saying something because I am not a United fan and neither are you. But this was a bicycle kick that even when I saw it, I said, good Lord. And if you're somebody who has not seen the clip, get on X and hop on over there and search that bad boy up. All you have to do is type in bicycle kick and it'll be the first one that comes up. Absolute magic. It was a banger from the top corner and he just sank it. It literally shocked me. My breath was taken away. That was an incredible kick. That's something that I think is going to be living in their highlight reel.
No, yeah, it was amazing. I remember I saw a tweet about it before seeing the actual kick, and it was mentioned, kick it or goal of the year or something like that. And I was like, oh god, typical Man U fans, whatever, whatever. I guess they have nothing else to look forward to. And then I saw it, and I was like, Jesus Christ, that thing was a beauty, and it's kind of disheartening too. It just shows I'll never be able to do that. I'll never be that good.
No,
So,
like even me
uh,
kicking it would like normally wouldn't have that kind of just zip that he had whipping himself upside down. Like it was a beauty. And if you're somebody that hasn't seen it, get to it. You'll be amazed even though you know it's coming.
yeah, no, it's for sure candidate. It's not if it's not the front runner as we speak. It's for sure a candidate. It's incredible.
Yeah.
My story has a Man U connection to it. My story takes us across the globe to the land of the rising sun, Japan. That is because the Japanese league finished this week. So after EPL finished last year, I was bored and I was looking for a new team to watch as MLS was getting ready to gear up as well. So I started to watch a few Japanese league games because they show all their games on YouTube for American fans. I gravitated towards a certain club, Osaka, Saraso Osaka. Unfortunately, they didn't win it, but Vessel Kobe won the Japanese championship um, based off their points. Now, the reason I mentioned Man U, they have Juan Mata. I don't know if you recall, he
Oh,
played with
no
Man U for a
shit,
few years.
really?
Yeah, and up until 2 months ago, they had Andres Iniesta. He retired there. He played for a few years there after leaving Barcelona, and he barely retired like 2 months ago. And I believe he's going to get like a front office role if he doesn't want to come to MLS because it seems like Miami's signing everybody. Um, but no joke, if you get a chance to jump on YouTube, check out the Japanese league. It's fun, and those fans get way into it. The fan culture is very different over there, and they're free on YouTube. But there's more to the story. So below that, Japanese has promotion and relegation, and the Japanese two league, which is the league right under J1. You had the top two teams get promoted. So we have Makita Zelvia, and sorry if I botched these, and Jubilu Iwata that both got promoted into J1 next year. This Friday, 11 o'clock p.m. Central Time. It'll be on YouTube. We have the third team playing for that final promotion spot, and that is going to be Tokyo Verdy. That's the second team in Tokyo against Shimizu S Pulse. And the winner of that match will get promoted into J1 next year. So, soccer fans, if you get a chance, go on YouTube, search up the Japanese J1 League, and the match will be played at 11 o'clock p.m. our time. And it's a fun league. So,
So
those
wait,
are, go ahead.
why? I know you said you were looking for something before MLS started, but why were you like, what's going on in the Japanese league? Like, how did you come across this?
So, I had this whole, so I was looking for, I had like I had bullet points that I was looking for. So the first one was I had to be able to stream it or to watch the games. So I got that with YouTube. It had to be at a time favorable to me. Like I wasn't gonna wake up at like 4 a.m. to watch these matches, and a lot of these matches hit at like 11 p.m. So those are my like main two things, and just something that would be fun to watch. Like I'm not trying to watch. I don't know. I'm not trying to watch like the Lagos League, or I'm not trying to watch the Cambodian League. Like they I'm not a scout by any means, but a lot of these teams seem like they could give some MLS clubs a run for their money. And I mean, Japan in general, they're not a bad team internationally. So, um, and then I mean, you get guys like Endo with Liverpool. I mean, they produce some really good talent into the EPL. So it's been a fun side thing to watch. I don't watch all the games. I'd be lying to you if I said I did. But if I'm free on a Friday and I see there's a good match, I'll check it out. So I saw Vissel Kobe. I saw Iniesta's last match, and the crowd went nuts for him. So that was cool to see. And Juan Mata, the guy's been a bright spot out there. So it's been a fun little journey.
The Man United and Chelsea player.
Yeah.
That's incredible, man. I I kind of want to get a Japanese team now, and we can try to see if we can get a slow fan base built out.
Dude, there's these two guys. It's kind of frustrating. They beat us to the punch. They're from England. They're not even in Japan, and they kind of did what we just talked about doing. And they're like viral sensations out there. They're huge out there. It's so frustrating. So yeah, pick your team, and we'll beat them. We'll beat them at their own game.
I love it, and we'll just start breaking down them the way we ball, and then we can segment into the Japanese league and catch everybody else up on that.
Instead, our like avatars will just be like anime characters instead of we'll do like
I
the
like
bad
it.
lip reading and all that stuff. So awesome. So that was our balling around the globe. Our next segment, Brandon, we're bringing it back. People love it. I love it. It is our ball in or ball out. Giles, let the people know.
Ball in or ball out.
All right, Brandon. So we'll go with question number one.
Ball in or ball out. Neutral site final.
So a neutral site final. How do you feel? Are you ball in, ball out for the MLS finals being played at a neutral site?
So I know they used to do this, and it was not a very good turnout. And so obviously that is why they've changed it to now higher seed gets to host the final. And that does make it more like appetizing to finish in the said top of the division, finish out with the top points, because getting to host a final is pretty unique in terms of in this sport. Saying that, I'm ball out though, because I think MLS is making a mistake here. They should take the final four teams and put it into a neutral site. So that way you have four fan bases converging on into like the final. And obviously, so like say you and I say it's in Vegas this year, right? We go all out there and it's, you know, Seattle, it's LAFC fans, Dynamo fans, Cincy, and Columbus fans in Vegas. We would all then assume like our team's going to win, so we could buy tickets for the championship. And then if even if we don't make it, well, let's just stick around and watch it anyway. You know what I mean? Like, I think you could still draw fans out that way. I think you can market it in a bigger way. I just I feel like it diminishes as our championship by not having it as a neutral site, when I think at this point the MLS has grown enough to where I'd like to see them try it again. So I think I said ball out on a neutral site. I meant to say
Yeah.
ball in. I'm I'm very much in on this.
Threw me off there. I was like, wait a second, what's this guy saying right now? I mean, I get what you're saying. I'm ball out just for the simple fact that we can't even fill up our own home right now, let alone a neutral site. I'd love me being. I would call myself a diehard. I love the idea. It would favor us given our current circumstances, but I just feel we have a lot of work to do at our own home before to even think about venturing out. So just for that one reason, I agree with all of the other points 100%, but for that one reason, I would have to be ball out on the neutral side idea.
The only thing is, I feel like if it was in a creative place, you might be more inclined to go and see it. What I mean by that is it was really cool how they did El Trafico at the Rose Bowl. Like that was really unique. I feel like if they figured out a place to put this in a historic spot, like for instance, obviously you couldn't do it this way, but imagine if the Astrodome held it. You know what I mean? You know, awesome and like different and weird that would be. But a place like that in America, if it was held there, I think you might be more inclined to go.
Yeah, if only we had our Wembley, that'd be perfect. But
Yeah.
no, yeah, I see what you're saying. Man, now you got me thinking. What I'm trying to think of how to one up that. What would be
But it
my
also
creative stadium?
pushes an idea that like if it grows big enough that we could build a Wembley and have it for our United, like our national team, but it would also be the host to every single MLS championship game, especially with the rise of USL. Like I think this is something that would be more unique that you could market it to being bigger and bigger and bigger, especially if Messi makes it. Like, you know, the MLS would try to definitely push it that way. And you then would call for a neutral site for a whole different reason. It'd be big enough to fill. Like, I think this is something that you start now because the talent levels is there.
All right, so we had one ball in, one ball out. Let's Giles, let's get our next topic.
Ball in or ball out. Nelson Quinones 5-year contract.
So Nelson Quinones with the 5-year contract, ball in or ball out. I'll kick it off. I'm ball in just because he's young, and sign him up, get him a long year contract, put a high buyout price tag on it, and make us some mother effing money.
Right there with you, man. Ball in for sure. I think he is a legit some tool that we can build for the future. I think if he can develop more and more, he could be a top 10 goal scorer. Like I know that sounds high up there, but I have big faith in this kid, especially with how young he is and how he plays in big games. Give me more of that.
Yeah, and I mean, we mentioned it to kick off the episode. He's a left foot away from being elite, and I really mean elite. And I could
Yep.
see this kid playing in Europe, whether it's Portugal or elsewhere. I mean, he's still young. He's going to get bigger. He's going to get stronger, and that left foot can only get better. So whether it's for the Dynamo's benefit or not, or whether it's just to sell him 2-3 years from now, sign him, lock him in. It's crazy that we were not even sure if we were going to keep him from his current loan spell, and now look at us. So, yeah, ball in, unanimous decision on Nelson Quinones.
Ball in or ball out. Top points make playoffs.
So no conferences, no Eastern, no Western, meaning the top seeded teams would get the playoff spots. What are your how are you feeling on this, Brandon?
Ball in tremendously. I think getting rid of conferences and just having your top point getters makes it for a more exciting playoffs. It also allows for the future to be set up to where you could theoretically have fans understand how promotion and relegation would work then by bringing in USL teams. I think enough people would understand what it's like and figure it out a bit more. I think it would be too shocking just from going to playoffs one day in conferences to just suddenly know if you're in the bottom, you're gone. So this would be a healthy way to do that. Plus, it's a different way for us to stand out. If we're going to keep doing a playoff system like this, then I don't think it should be conferences. I think we can then add in an EPL style where being in the top table matters, but being the top in the West, but if it's a weak West, isn't that exciting? You know, you kind of just eke on through and good teams get knocked out where we could have a better product out there. So that I'm all for a better product. I think this makes it for a better league. Get rid of conferences, just do top points for playoff seeding.
I'm a little so I like where you're coming from, and I agree. It makes for a better product. The only thing that tears me away from fully going in on this is that the U.S. is so vast. So let's say Houston's playing New York, NYCFC, but then Columbus and Cincinnati are playing in that first round, and then the next round, Houston would have to travel to Cincinnati or Columbus, where they didn't have to do much of any travel. So you get the wear and tear on the guys, and I feel like that works in England, Portugal, these smaller countries, but the U.S. is just so big. Just to make things fair, I feel like that's tough to pull off. That's my only thing. That's the only reason I'm hesitant to go ball in, because as you said, it's a better product on the field, and you're going to see the best of the best. And to be honest, I mean, we all know the only reason we have conferences is to make the air travel cheaper for the league. But aside from that, I mean, there's really no point in them. Um, so my only reason is just fairness and keeping things at a level playing field in the playoffs, that I would have to go ball out on the no conferences.
If you played more games, I would say that the travel would be a problem. Like if you played 3 games in a week, then 100%. But when you're playing essentially, especially in these playoffs, one game every so often, especially with the international break, and the way that they can travel today, like they're, chartering a jet. They're not really, all group boarding sea, you know what I mean? And flying around here. So I think the travel is a little bit easier, especially in the duration of their games. So their bodies can handle a little bit more. You're right. Being in Portugal and England is such an advantage because you can just take a train, right? You can't really do that in America. You have to take flights, but at least they're taking top tier flights. These billionaire owners can afford it. It puts us on the map in a different way as well. I think that is more attractive for us to be able to play top competition. It might start to get more of Liga MX stars to jump to MLS because you see a better overall product. That's all I keep preaching. I think this helps strengthen it. I think the MLS ratings would be huge. For instance, do you think these playoffs are missing Messi right now? Like, of course, right, in terms of ratings, but would this be a better playoff if they were right now in the East facing off against Cincinnati?
You tell me Columbus isn't primetime TV?
I mean, to me, yes, they are. The MLS fans, sure, but in terms of getting eyeballs, they want the best in there, right? So I want the best overall teams because then you get a better overall playoff product, and then it just looks better, especially being on Apple, where we're an international platform, like worldwide. This needs to be, we don't need to be a conference league anymore. We need to be just our best teams are making it.
So I will say I should have clarified. I was under the assumption that we were still doing a best of three round one. So that's where the travel came into effect. If we're not going that format, then yeah, ball in, because then at that point, like you said, it doesn't matter. But I was just thinking of like our Real Salt Lake match. That would have been a pain in the ass going to New England, having to play them in a 3-game series back and forth and back. So
that
if you
that's
go,
fair.
yeah, if you go
Yeah.
traditional, knockoff game, round 1 and
Yes.
on, then yeah, ball in. To me, like you said, it just makes for a better product. It makes for a better product on TV. Um, I mean, I'm sure we'll get the numbers eventually, but there's so many people who've never seen an MLS match in their life before, and they're watching just because of Messi. And I'm sure
Yeah.
a lot of those guys are watching these matches, these Houston matches that don't have Messi involved. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you. If you just have the better teams, not just what made up the conference, then you you just have a better product all around. So
I think it also
yeah,
forces the owners to spend more money because if you're now officially only in the top like 16, you're not as safe as being in the top, 8 or 9 in your own division. Now you have to be top of the top. And I just feel like that makes for a better product. Like I if we're going to keep this playoff format and instead of promotion and relegation, and then we need to do it to where okay, now everybody's on equal feet. You just now have to have the better squad, either spend more or have better development. I think that makes us a better overall league, and we can jump more of these other leagues that we're competing with in terms of getting players.
and getting players is no longer an issue because we have an owner that spends. Brandon, that's how we will wrap up today's episode. A special shout out to Mr. Ted Siegel for investing in this team, believing in Houston. And look at what you had. You have a full Shell Energy Stadium. You have a team competing for the MLS final. And it's just been an amazing ride. So we will end today's episode on that note. For the Way We Ball podcast, I'm Jamal.
And I'm Brandon, and this is the way we ball.